Hey, welcome back to another episode of Fleet Safety Geeks. I'm here with Phil Mosier. Phil, how are you?
Good. How you doing, Bob? Good to see you.
Yeah, good to see you. This is Distracted Driving Month. I think we should probably talk about that at some point, right?
Yeah, distracted driving month. I mean, it should be distracted driving year, century, decade. Everybody should be aware of it all the time, right? I'm glad that they have a month where they raise awareness, maybe, but every minute, every second of every day, really, we should be dedicating ourselves to eradicate distracted driving. In my opinion.
Absolutely, I agree. In fact, we talk about it all the time. We've had a lot of different episodes talking about a lot of different things, but one of our main focuses has been on distracted driving. From the guests that we have, from the topics that we talk about. So anybody that talks about safety or fleet safety or just safety in general should be focusing on this all the time. I absolutely agree with you. Regardless, it does seem to keep rearing its ugly head. Record numbers of crashes and injuries and fatalities globally year over year. So it's something that just needs to really be focused on probably a little bit harder.
Yeah, and at what point, right? So I wrote an article for one of the trade magazines, and I came up with a statistic, Bob, which is really kind of scary. Every second, and I'm just talking U.S. statistics here now because that's what I have available to me. But every second, 51 people in 2021, every second, 51 people were injured as a result of car crashes. 1,001, 1,002. There's 102 for you. At what point do we? Just get behind the wheel and drive, and that's it. Right. At what point does this become a major point? And the thing of it is too is people are under such a false assumption that I'm using hands free or whatever, and that's perfectly fine, and it's not. It's really not, and I'm going to call people out on that. They really need to understand that that's not okay. If you're on the phone, you're as likely to crash as a person with a 0.08 blood alcohol.
Yeah.
It's not okay.
I think the statistics say that you're probably more likely to be involved. And that certainly does not condone drinking and driving. But I think you're more likely to be involved in an accident using your phone than having that blood alcohol level.
Right.
I think
so
almost
if you're
4 times higher.
If you're texting, tweeting, emailing, any of that alphanumeric stuff, you're 23 times more likely, not 23% more likely, 23 times more likely. And think about that. It's not 10 times more likely or, 15 times. It's 23 times more likely. If you have just double the risk of something, you wouldn't do it. You're 23 times. And I see people doing it all the time. And it's mind numbing to me how this continues to go on. And we've had some guests, Tosh Harding Springs, the Kiefer Foundation, we had Corey from No Cell, and they all talk about the distractions and things like that. But there are many distractions. So I just don't want to focus in on just one thing like electronics use. There are many things that cause distraction. The problem with the electronics, though, is that the volume of the violation. Right, you pull up to an intersection, you look around, you see multiple people using their cellular devices. You don't see as many people maybe correcting a child or drinking, or eating a burger. You still see that, and that's not good either. It's just not good. I'm in no way condoning any of that activity. But it's the volume of the violation with the electronics, I think, that gets the attention.
Yeah. And I think a lot of that comes from the statistics that come from it. Every time there's a crash, they look at it. And unfortunately, young people who probably use their phone more are the ones that have a higher rate. But when you start looking at it, all the rates are just way too high, regardless of the age group. People are just too dependent on their phones. And you brought up an interesting point that you feel like during the COVID shutdown, a lot of people kind of use their phone more, and that was their connection to the outside world. And that's a really good point. But statistics, they've been looking at them for years, and we've had high crash rates and fatality rates from distracted driving. Now, if it's not just phones, like you said, it's other distractions, those are all included. But I think the number started going up when cell phones became a little bit more mainstream.
Certainly, and that is absolutely correct. So, I mean, and it's well documented. Cell phone use, you're using your electronics, it's addictive. Okay, and the example I always use, and it might be a little gross, is you can't go to the bathroom without the damn thing. I mean, and it never ceases to amaze me when I walk into a public restroom and I hear people in the stalls and like in-depth conversations. It's like, does the person on the other end of the line know what you're doing right now? I mean, come on. But people are so addicted that they can't stop themselves. I mean, just put the darn thing down. People will drive back 5 miles to get their phone if they forgot their phone, even though they're going to be back home in another hour. They still have to have the thing because they feel kind of naked if they don't have it. That's an addiction, Bob. And people have not put them down. You're exactly right. During the COVID shutdown, that was the only lifeline people had to the outside world for a lot of people, and they became even more addicted to them. So I think that has a lot to do with the issues we're seeing right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. Globally, just because, we have listeners that consistently tune in to this podcast outside the U.S. So we try and talk about all that, but the numbers are even more astonishing. Like, obviously globally is a much larger area than the U.S., but not all of these, fatalities are from distracted driving, but there's 1.25 million people who die every year on the roads from crashes. And we have to assume that a lot of those are from distractions. In the U.S. alone, you said every few seconds, 100 people are injured. What was that?
Every second, 51 people are injured.
That's insane, right? That's
51.
injured.
Right.
That's
incredible. And you're right. Go ahead. I'm sorry.
9 people die every day in the U.S. from distracted driving, and I
think that number is low. I look at the statistics that I see for distracted driving fatalities and things like that. I think those numbers are actually being reported low because maybe the investigation wasn't as thorough as it should be to determine whether distraction did play a role in that. And the other thing of it is this, and we've had this conversation previously, Bob. The number one distraction, according to the insurance industry in the United States, the number one distraction is daydreaming.
Mm-hmm.
And think about that. Have you ever driven somewhere, you arrive at your destination, you can't remember anything about the drive, or you go through a traffic signal, you get to the other side and you start thinking, was it green? Was it red? Your mind was elsewhere. So when you find your mind wandering, you have to get yourself refocused. You kind of have to train yourself, so that when you find that you've lost miles, now what do? And what you can do is just start speaking out loud what you're seeing. The car at that intersection, that car might pull out in front of me. I'm covering the brake. You say it out loud. That kid in that driveway might come out in the road. I'm going to watch for that kid. You say it out loud. The knucklehead behind me is tailgating me. I'm going to pull over and let him go by. If you say it out loud, it forces you to think about your driving. So when you find your mind wandering, going other places, work, home, whatever, that's when you need to recognize it and then do something about it.
Right. It's interesting. That's a great way to keep yourself focused, but that's also what I have my daughter do when I'm teaching her to drive. Because you always say we should be scanning. We should constantly be looking side to side, looking in the mirrors, kind of doing that. And I find her kind of getting tunnel vision. So I always say, as you drive down the street, read off every other street name. Tell me what color car is behind you. And it keeps her kind of focused and doing that. So that's also a good point too, to keep people from daydreaming, keep them focused on, the task at hand. So that's great, good advice.
I've done many ride-alongs with risk level drivers, higher risk level drivers. I've done, safety ride-alongs with them, trying to help them. And one of the things I'll do is I'll say, don't look in your mirror, what's behind you? And I'll bet you 90% of the time they can't tell me. You need to scan your mirrors every 5 to 7 seconds. If you're rotating your vision, you're constantly rotating your vision 360. Guess what? That makes you focus. People do it. It's talking about speaking out loud, saying what you're saying. It's kind of like commentary drive, right? So it's saying what you're saying. Most people do a version of this. What I ask them to do is remove the profanity, and continue on with that, because it really does help you to focus in. Now, the distraction gets a lot of play with the electronics, which it should. It definitely should. But then there's also, the eating and the kids. How about when you see people riding along with their foo-foo dog laying on their lap? That's animal cruelty, man. Because that airbag deploys.
It's getting shot into the back seat.
I mean, you're gonna have Fifi in your face. And that might be a little graphic, but it's really true. But you see this garbage going on all the time, and I don't know if that people don't understand, how quickly crashes occur. And Bob, we've had this discussion before also. When I reconstruct a crash, I'll break it down into quarter-second intervals sometimes, depending on how fast the vehicles are going. If people could get, and I'm not making this up, if people could get just a quarter-second of time, or even a half a second, a quarter-second of time back, they would have missed. Everybody goes home. And what was the number you said with how many people
die in the U.S.?
Globally, you had mentioned a number when we first started.
1.25 million people die in road crashes.
On the roads every year. Okay, so 1.25 million. Now, increase that 4, 5, 6, 7-fold. So that's how many people are affected. For the people who are gone,
right,
it's over for them. Right. I mean, so they don't have to face the effects of what's happened. But for the people left behind, and this is the point I always make, what occurs in a split second, guess what? For those people left behind, in a lifetime, they won't ever get over it. They learn how to cope. They learn how to move on, but they never get over it. I mean, I saw that within my own family. My grandfather was killed by a drunk driver year before I was born. And my grandmother's gone. My mother's gone now. But if I were to call up my aunt right now and start talking about my grandfather, she'd probably start crying. And that was decades ago. So the point I make is, think about what you're doing. When you decide to pick up that phone, or you decide to eat that burger, or you decide to turn around and try and correct your kid while you're driving, please think about consequences, cause and effect. So people need to understand that the bad decisions that they make can have lifetime lasting consequences for those left behind. And the other thing is, would you want to be that person who caused that hardship for somebody else?
Right.
I mean, there are consequences.
Yeah. Talk about guilt that you have to live with for a long time. I can't remember the statistic, and I don't know if there was a number behind it, but a lot of the people that are dying from a distracted driving crash are not in vehicles. They're pedestrians, bicyclists, others that totally innocent, totally unrelated to what's going on with that vehicle, and they're still getting involved in these crashes. And that's kind of, surprising.
Yeah, and with the increased statistics that we've seen with fatalities and injuries, we've also seen a drastic increase in the number of pedestrians who have also been killed. And I'll tell you what, too, that some of that is the pedestrians' fault, and that they're on their phones as well. I have a photograph of a guy in a parking lot almost hitting a lady who's walking across in front of him. He's on his phone and she's on hers. So it's like double whammy. And now let's put this one into the mix, Bob. Electric vehicles.
They're quiet. Yeah, they're even quieter.
They're quiet, right? So people who may have, looked up because they heard of a vehicle approaching now may not look up because they don't hear it. So pedestrians have a responsibility to also stay alert and pay attention to things like that. Now, my wife and I like bike riding. We go bike riding quite a bit now that the weather's getting warm again. And our heads are on swivels. We are paying attention the whole time. we are strictly on trails though, but even on trails or when we cross roads and things like that, there are safety protocols and you just follow those. A lot of people don't, especially kids and things like that. So if you're in a neighborhood, especially where there are kids and playing or riding bikes or scooters or whatever, man, you have an obligation to make sure that you're doing everything you can to be safe. Listen, a phone call, a burger, an argument with a passenger or whatever is not worth the risk. You have to pay attention.
Yeah, no, absolutely. So we're about 15 minutes in. We try and keep these about 20. Let's talk about different ways to avoid distractions. You talked about reading off things or talking out loud and keeping yourself focused to get away from the daydreaming. Obviously the phone, put it down, turn it off, put it in the glove box, do that. But the different types of distractions, there's the manual, looking away and not looking through the windshield. Visual can be related to that, looking at something that's more interesting than what's on the road. Cognitive, daydreaming or just whatever. But, I always have to be careful here because, I don't want to get too technical, but our brains can only perform one cognitive function at a time. And driving is a cognitive function. Talking on the phone is a cognitive function. And I always say when I use that example is you need to be able to think while talking on the phone. And even though your vehicle is in drive and your foot is on the gas pedal, it's going down the road, but you're not driving. Right. So what advice to close out this episode can we give to keep people, we've said it within the episode, but let's end it with, the top ways that we can keep people safe and avoid distractions.
Okay, so for the companies out there that have fleets of vehicles, there are devices that you can get that will dampen the phone, that will just block the phone from being used.
I highly support.
Motion, which is fantastic. I love that stuff. Anything that will again get people to get off those darn things. But then also you have a decision to make, right? And I understand that people are addicted to their phones, and I understand, people argue, well, I use hands-free, but what's the difference between that and talking to a passenger? Well, and I've mentioned this on our podcast previously. Mm-hmm. The studies have shown that it takes more of your cognitive ability to talk on the phone than it does to talk to somebody sitting next to you. And if you want to put it more simply, that's another set of eyes. If something starts happening, they'll shut up and maybe even say, "Hey, look out." Right. But the other thing is too, and what you said about cognitive, Bob. So it's splitting your attention. People say, "Well, I'm a great multitasker. That's why I can use a phone." Guess what? If you're driving, you're already multitasking. If you're pushing on the gas or the brake, and you're steering and you're using your signals and things like that, and you're scanning, that's already multitasking. Where if you're talking on a device or you're having an extended conversation with somebody in the vehicle, then guess what? Now you're splitting your attention. If you do have a passenger and they are disturbing you, they're taking your attention away from your driving, politely tell them, "Hey, I have to drive now. I know you want to arrive safely, so we'll continue this conversation when we're legally parked." Okay, and if they don't shut up, duct tape. Duct tape fixes everything.
Okay. That's perfect advice.
I can see people running to the store and buying duct tape. Please don't duct tape people's mouths because here's the disclaimer, Bob. That was a joke. Okay. Right. But no, you have to make a decision. And that decision is this. And here's the thing too, Bob. You have to make that decision multiple times during every drive.
Right.
Am I going to be safe or am I going to be unsafe? The next time the phone rings, are you going to let it go to voicemail, or do you have that thing already silenced, which you should have? Right. Or if you have the technology in the vehicle that's going to curb the phone use anyway, that's fantastic. Love that stuff. you have a decision to make every time you drive, and you have to make that decision multiple times. Will I be safe and make the smart and safe decision, or am I going to take a risk? I would ask you, please be safe.
Yeah. Yeah. And you bring up the right point, the cell phone. I don't know why. This is the addiction. That's why. Anytime that phone rings, people have to answer it. Oh my God, who's calling me? Or anytime there's a notification, who just texted me? What was that? Why do you need to know? Back in the day before we had cell phones, our phones would ring when we were at work at home, right? And we're at work. We didn't care who was calling. We missed the call. And then we got answering machines. Oh my God, we got to answer. We got to check that answering machine. You know, now we have our phone just attached to us, and we always know who's trying to reach us. And that's so annoying. But when you're driving, just turn it off. Turn off notifications. That notification is what is Pavlov's dog, right? You know, for you, that's the bell ringing where you have to perform and do something. Just turn it off and have that avoided.
Yeah. I mean, the phone rings, they start to draw, and then they answer it. You know, I mean, it's like Pavlov's effect, right? So, tell me these things aren't addicting. They absolutely are.
Right,
you know,
right.
And that does not bode well for safe driving. But if you can get yourself trained, like I said, trained, and I'm making it sound like we are dogs, I don't care.
Got to do it.
That's what you have to do. I mean, that's what you have to do. And again, understand cause and effect. And like I said, a call, a burger, take time out to eat. If your kids, all I would have to say to my kids when they were little was, do I need to stop this car? And they'd say, no, Dad, you don't need to stop this car, because I get loud. You know, if they were carrying on and distracting. And once in a while I would stop the car and they would get an earful. And that was enough. Then I didn't have to do it any longer. And that might sound like, oh, you terrible parent. I don't care, man. It's better than crashing with the kids in the car, right? Bob, I would stop people who had the kids jumping around in the car and everything. And they'd say, well, I can't get them to sit down. I can't get them to behave. You tell them. I said, you're the parent. Be the parent.
Right.
You know,
right.
That's your responsibility. And then I'd write them up for not having the kid in the seat. You know,
Good for you.
Yeah, I know that was an instant ticket. I didn't care.
Right.
And maybe that will then make them be a better parent and keep that kid in the seat. Because a kid jumping around the car, guess what? That's a major distraction. Things that are loose in the car that start falling down, you go and grab for them. You know, you get the spill from eating the burger, you know, the drip, and then you're reaching down for the wad of napkins. That's a distraction. Anything that takes your attention away from your driving, get rid of it. Don't do it. Make the decision to be safe.
Yep. And that goes right to what Steve Kiefer from Kiefer Foundation says, just drive. And that's what we should be doing when we're behind the wheel.
It's pretty simple, isn't it? Yet it's so hard for people to do that. I love that, right. You know, he puts the paddle up, just drive. That's exactly right. Steve Kiefer hit it right on the head with that one.
Right. Yep. Exactly. All right. Phil, I'm going to just remind people about NAFA INE this year. I hope everybody is going to be attending from the fleet industry that can. And we'll be broadcasting live from the NAFA booth on the expo floor both days. That should be interesting, and I'm looking forward to that. If anybody wants to participate, just let us know. Put something in the message on this YouTube or reach us on LinkedIn. And we'll definitely schedule something, just 5-minute little interviews. How is safety important? What does your organization do? We haven't really come up with all the questions, but it's not just for fleet managers. It's for the suppliers out there. What do you have as a product to keep drivers safe? And we want to learn as much about it and share as much as we can from other people and what they're doing. So I'm pretty excited about it. It's going to be a fun time. And hopefully we don't have any hiccups.
Hopefully, Bob. Hopefully, going live. I mean, that's, you get we should call it Fleet Safety Geeks warts and all when we're going live, because there's nothing gets edited out. So
that's right.
Yep. It will be what it is,
We'll have to watch out for the potty words.
That's right.
All right, Phil, have a great weekend. And thank you for doing this with me. I really appreciate it. And looking forward to the next episode and seeing you at NAFA.
Bye.
All right. Thanks. We'll see you.